Okay, so with this video, we wrap up our discussions of ARC Section 60A, and this particular video will be regarding acceptance and continuance of client relationships and engagements. So before we accept a new client or decide to continue doing the accounting and review services of a client we've already been in a relationship with, there are several steps that we need to go to and several things that we need to consider. So first here at ARC Section 60A.25, it says that we should not accept an engagement to be performed in accordance with SSARS if we have reason to believe that we would not be able to meet the ethical requirements that we're required to. So for instance, maybe we're not independent. Another reason we might decide not to accept an engagement would be if there's not enough information or it's unreliable, and that way we wouldn't be able to perform our engagement at all, or at least be able to rely on the information that's given to us, so maybe we should not accept that engagement either. And finally, if we have doubt about management's integrity, then maybe we shouldn't accept that engagement either, because that would be pervasive across all of the accounts and financial statements. And so it might be difficult for us to gather enough evidence to get comfortable over the financial statements. So for those three reasons, we might decide not to accept an engagement. Then here at number 26, they provide us with a list of items that we need to do before we accept an engagement, and this is what we call the premise. So first, we need to understand enough about the engagement and its requirements and circumstances to determine whether our firm or our engagement team has the competence to actually perform that engagement with high quality. So if this is in an industry, or the client's in an industry that we're unfamiliar with, we might consider consulting with someone outside the firm that has the competence in that area, or if we can't really get satisfied that we have the appropriate competence, we might not accept that engagement. Or we could take some CPE or something to make sure we have that competence. And then next, we want to make sure that the financial reporting framework selected by management is appropriate. So if rules and regulations require the entity to have, for instance, a regulatory basis of accounting, then we would want to make sure that management has selected that particular financial reporting framework. Or maybe if the client's bank requires the financial statements to be in GAAP, then we would want to make sure that management has applied that framework. So next, we need to obtain an agreement from management that it acknowledges its responsibilities. And this usually comes in the form of what we call an engagement letter. But management has several responsibilities as it relates to the engagement that we're performing. So this is a list of those responsibilities. And so in our engagement letter with management, we'd want them to sign off on each of these, or sign off on the letter saying that it agrees that it has these responsibilities here. So first, management has a responsibility to select the financial reporting framework to be applied in preparing the financial statements. They also have the responsibility to design, implement, and maintain their internal control. They also have the responsibility for preventing and detecting fraud. They have the responsibility to ensure that they comply with laws and regulations applicable to its activities. They also have responsibility for the accuracy and completeness of the records, documents, explanations, and other information that they provide to us. And finally, they have a responsibility to provide us with several items, and the first of which is access to all information that management's aware of that is relevant to our engagement and to the preparation of its financial statements. They also have a responsibility to provide us with additional information that we might request in our engagement. And they also have a responsibility to provide us unrestricted access to persons within the entity that we determine it's necessary to make inquiries of. So if we can fulfill each of these steps by making an engagement letter that has all of these management requirements in it that they can sign, and then we get satisfied over the financial reporting framework, we decide that we have the necessary competence to actually perform the engagement. If we find that we're comfortable over management's integrity and over the reliability and availability of the information that they provide us, and also if we get comfortable that we can meet our ethical requirements, then we can accept or continue our client relationships. Now we have a lot of explanatory material here, so we can get some more information on how to comply with this section. So it looks like it starts at A46 through A51. So let's go down to that section. Okay, so here we're down in the explanatory material as it relates to acceptance and continuance of client relationships and engagements. So they note here, and as we saw in prior videos related to the engagement partners, responsibilities for engagement level quality control, we're supposed to consider our ethical requirements throughout the engagement and whether we are still complying with our ethical requirements through every phase and step of the engagement. But here they make note that by assessing our ethical requirements at the beginning of the engagement when we're deciding whether to accept or continue a client relationship, that helps us to sort of set the stage for all of the actions and decisions that we take throughout the engagement. And they specify that independence is included within these ethical requirements. So this next A48 is in reference to our need to determine whether the information that will be provided to us is available and also reliable. And so they suggest an example of where that might occur would be if the records that are necessary for performing analytical procedures are suspected to be substantially inaccurate or incomplete. So if we come across that situation, we may decide that we may not want to accept or continue that engagement because we would be wholly unable to perform the procedures that we need to. So next, A49 refers to our requirement to determine whether the financial reporting framework that management selected is acceptable. And so to provide a couple of factors that we might consider. First one is that we would consider the purpose of the financial statements. For example, whether they're prepared to meet common financial information needs of a wide range of users. In that case, we would use more of a general framework, such as GAAP. And another factor we might consider is whether law or regulation prescribes applicable financial reporting framework. So if a law or regulation requires the entity to have a regulatory basis of accounting, then we would want to make sure that that's the financial reporting framework that management selected. And so A50 here is in regard to our responsibility to get an agreement with management that they understand their responsibility, and we have to do that before we accept or continue the engagement. So they give us some more information about if we're using smaller, or our client is a smaller entity and maybe not as well informed about their responsibilities. And in that case, we might discuss those responsibilities with them before we maybe send them an engagement letter that makes them sign off on those responsibilities. So that might be a good practice. So finally, A51 gives some more information on our or management's responsibility to provide us all the information we need to perform the engagement. And so they specify that the form of the information could be in a lot of different forms depending on the engagement circumstances. So it could be records, it could be documents, it could be explanations from management, maybe both written and oral. So this section covers not only, or management's requirements to provide us with all information we need, and so there's no limit to the types of information we might need. So this gives us the ability to perform our engagement effectively and to fulfill our responsibilities.